Hello there, this is Vin and Pip's channel, Covenant of Promise. Um, so, I've had these feasters saying very silly things lately. And one of the things that they were saying is that Paul kept the feasts outside the land. And I've had countless people who are keeping the feasts tell me this, and it's not true. So let's just put it to bed once and for all, right? Okay, we're in Acts, and this is where they say he kept the feast in Acts. So we're in Acts 18, yeah? Let's go to chapter 20. Right. So I'll just explain quickly. Paul is with a Jewish people synagogue, and he's basically preaching the gospel like he went around and did. So when they desired him to tarry longer, because they're listening to him, time with them, he consented not, but bade them farewell, saying, I must by all means keep this feast that cometh in Jerusalem. Right? Bear in mind, right? He's in Ephesus, right? Which is Turkey, somewhere around there, right? That's where you get the ship from anyway, to get to Caesarea, which is next to Jerusalem. So he says, I must keep this feast that cometh in Jerusalem, but I will return again unto you, if God will. And he sailed from Ephesus, and when he had landed at Caesarea and gone up to salute the church, he went down to Antioch, which is right next to Jerusalem. Right, so that proves that he's actually got on the ship from Ephesus and gone back to the land, yeah. Now I looked into this, right, so as you know, his ministry is in Macedonia, it's in, obviously eventually it ends up in Rome, but it's in Galatia, it's Philippi, it's everywhere, it's all over Greece, Turkey. It's miles away from Jerusalem. It's miles away. So I looked it up, right? It takes him 51 days, there or thereabouts, to sail on a sail ship from Ephesus to Caesarea, which is near Jerusalem, right? So another 51 days to get back. And if you read on, it says he only didn't tarry there for long. He went there, went to the feast, and then got back up, made his way back, right? And then what he said, he's going to come back, and he goes back and strengthens all the ministries, and that's where you get all the rest of the books from, like Thessalonians, Galatians, so on and so forth. But so he doesn't. So there's another 51 days at least to get back to his ministry. So that's a quarter. That's a quarter of a year away from his ministry where he needed to be. Yeah. And he left people like Titus and other different people in charge of those ministries. And he went back to all those places to see how they were doing. Like I said, and that's where you get all the rest of your books from. Galatians, so on and so forth. But you tell me, if he needed to be in Macedonia or wherever it might be, why would he go all the way, right, back to Ephesus, to get the boat from Ephesus, to sail for 51 days, to go to Jerusalem, if he could have just kept the feast where he was doing his ministry? Why would you do that? Why would you put yourself out so badly? I mean, a quarter of a year's travel, if you could just keep the feast where you were, you know. So it's just a common sense look at it. I mean, would you do that? Would you travel for a quarter of a year when your ministry's on the other side of the world, when you know you've got to go straight back there? He obviously knew that he had to go back to where the feast was being held. The feast isn't just something you can keep in your back garden, feasters. It's not. You had to go where the tribes gathered, where the place was consecrated with the name of the Father, where his presence was there, where the high priests were there, where the holy vessels were. You know what I mean? Everything had to be in place. The lamb had to be ready or whatever. There's a lot of rules. It was very specific. And look, Aaron's sons kept the feast wrong. Both of them struck down dead. And if you read Leviticus and you do it wrong, you're in big trouble. You're cut off. And you think just having a big load of burgers on a barbecue, it's all going to go well for you. But anyway, look, this is another bit that they were talking about. Go to 1923. And I'm not going to read it, but this whole thing is about, they're in Ephesus, right? And all the idols, all the people who make the idols, you know, the craftsmen who make them, they're going out of business because everyone's listening to Paul. So a riot erupts because these guys are out of a job and they're pissed with Paul. So he has to flee, basically, right? And he ends up in Philippi. And it says, if you go to 20, verse 6, and we sailed away from Philippi after the days of unleavened bread, and came unto them to Troas into 5 days. Into Troas in 5 days, so 5 days travel. We abode 7 days. Now, that's by the by. But because he says we sailed away from Philippi after the days of unleavened bread, they say he kept the feast of unleavened bread. It doesn't say he kept the feast of unleavened bread. He was aware that he was travelling and travelled after the days of unleavened bread. It doesn't mention that he kept the feast at all. So it's a vain imagining, isn't it? It's something that you've just imagined. Don't you think if he'd have kept that feast that he would have mentioned it? Don't you think it would have been written that how much of a great feast it was and how much of a great time? And, you know, whoever, Titus was, you know, dancing a jig, and you would have heard all about it. You know, it doesn't mention that they kept it whatsoever. It just says they sailed away from Philippi in the time of unleavened bread. Just like in Tobit when I was reading, he's having dinner in his house. And there's actually, I can't remember what feast it was now, but there's a feast happening. He mentions the day of the feast, but he's just having dinner in his house with his missus. He's not keeping the feast. And in chapter 1, he actually says about going back to the land. Every year he goes back to keep Passover, every year, you know. And he said this place is where the presence of Jehovah is. And it's a decree for all the tribes to go back there to do the sacrifice and do the feasts. They're the words out of his own mouth. So he wasn't keeping the feasts either, because he wouldn't say that otherwise, would he? Goes back every year because he can have two in his back out. But anyway, let's please stop saying Paul kept the feast out of the land, because you've got no evidence for it. It's just all your own vain imaginings. Till next time.